Welcome everybody to today's episode of the Conscious Grief series. I am very honoured to be here with Tahnee Knowles. Tahnee is a mindful grief coach and the founder of Bump and Mind Retreats. And also we go back, don't we? A long way.
We do. Yeah.
We met nearly probably 10 plus years ago when we were in fashion. And now we've ended up in grief. So that's a very interesting cycle that we've been on. So it's really good.
Incredible how it happens.
I know, it is incredible. And it's really good to reconnect with you. So thank you for being here.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
And the first question I'd like to just start each interview with is, how do you define grief?
So I love that you asked that question, actually, because I haven't contemplated it really before. So it's got me thinking about how I define it, which is interesting that I haven't thought about it before because it's such a big part of what I do and what I'm about right now. But I think for me particularly, my definition would be the ongoing relationship that you have with something or someone that you can't have physically anymore. So it's everything that comes with that relationship, relationships ending, lives ending. However that relationship continues to be is your grief, is the grief that you carry, basically. And they're like every relationship, there are goods and bads and there are ups and downs. And I think that grief develops over time. But I don't think it ever truly leaves you. If there was something that you loved wholeheartedly, something or someone, when that physical relationship comes to an end and you can no longer have that person there with you or that thing there with you, what you hold on to is the grief, and it sort of replaces their absence, but the love isn't replaced.
Wow, thank you for that. For somebody who feels like they haven't thought about it before, you have a very articulate, beautiful definition. So thank you.
I thought about it for about 5 minutes.
And now, what led you to become the mindful grief coach, Tahnee? So if you could explain your journey a little bit.
Yeah, so obviously to anybody that doesn't know me already, I last year in June, on the 10th of June, our second son, Elvis, died during labour. And before that, I was a pregnancy wellness hypnobirthing teacher. And I had been teaching pregnant women the benefits of mindfulness for years. And I would hold retreats. I did pregnancy wellness retreats, which was a combination of mindfulness, which obviously integrated meditation. We had hypnobirthing. We had lots of yoga, nutrition. So all the ways that you can be fully mindful and well in your pregnancy, basically, and helping you with the best start of birth and early parenthood. So when Elvis died in labor, you can imagine that was a really difficult hurdle to overcome, not overcome the death of my son, because I don't think that you fully overcome those things. They stay with you. But I really needed to change my direction after losing him, because teaching pregnant women, being around pregnant women who hadn't previously experienced loss, and teaching them about the benefits of a mindful pregnancy and birth was really difficult when my son died in labor. So I had to change course, but at the time I wasn't thinking about work. I was just fully investing in my grief. And I'm somebody that I perhaps a bit of a perfectionist with things. So I wanted to grieve well. I wanted to do grief well. And so I put so much of my energy and time into, just as I did in the pregnancy, being really mindful and present during my pregnancy with Elvis, which I'm so glad that I was, because I didn't know that that was the only time that I had with him then. So glad that I was, because I really enjoyed every moment of that. Not just enjoyed it, you know, there were difficult times as well, but I was just fully invested and mindful within that pregnancy. So when it came to living with the grief of losing Elvis, I decided that I needed to be really there and fully present for everything that I felt and all of the emotions that came with it. And it didn't serve me to push them back. I really needed to be welcoming to them. And, you know, that was Elvis's time and I needed to give that to him. So I took the time to just be fully present and mindful in my grief, which is actually, I've never had to use mindfulness for something that's hard, that's difficult before. It was always for pleasure and to be present in fun and happy moments, and never to be present in the really difficult things and moments that you would never imagine that you would have to live through. So I think through doing that, I really experienced I don't even think I can call it a benefit to being present in grief, but I experienced I think, life-changing approach to being able to invest in that time that was Elvis's time, and be there and present for the grief that I was feeling. And that was my way of mothering him. So when I realized the benefits myself of fully investing that time into him and into the grief, and being mindful in grief, I realized through, you know, my circles, my networking circles that I had from when I was a teacher in pregnancy and birth, that people were coming to me who were experiencing the same thing. And not that they weren't dealing with it as well. I wouldn't say they weren't dealing with it as well, but they needed a way. And they would constantly say to me, I really want to stop feeling how I'm feeling. I can't feel this anymore. And I think that it was really eye-opening for me to hear that and sort of try to explain to them that really allowing yourself and investing in those feelings and those emotions is really what's going to help you in the long run, and building a relationship with them, and knowing that they're there because of that huge love that you have for that child, and that those feelings won't go. So if you're able to be open to them, invite them in, eventually it'll become easier to deal with them, and they'll be softer, but they're never going to fully leave you. So when I realized the benefit it was having for me, and also the people that I was talking to, I decided to sort of change course and use the mindfulness techniques that I had developed over my time as a hypnobirthing teacher to apply it to grief. It doesn't replace counseling, psychotherapy, anything like that. It's more just as a helping hand to, you know, help support people through that really challenging time. So I, you know, reinvented what I did, and I just decided to change course. And it's a way of helping people, which is amazing, and what I truly love doing. But equally, and any bereaved parent will say this, that they're, you know, when you find something that you can do that continues that bond with your child, you become fully invested in it and completely in love with what it is that you're doing, because it's a way to remain connected to them and in the process really help people. So that's how I became a mindful grief coach.
I just feel so much wisdom when I speak to you, you know, and I just think it's really incredible how it's such a short space of time as well. And how you turned it around and used your mindfulness and really understood the importance of staying with the emotions, because so often we want to, as the people who are coming to you and saying, I don't want to feel like this anymore, just we're so used to wanting that quick fix, aren't we? Just like, take me away from this feeling. And you really have the understanding and the wisdom to know that you've got to, is however hard it is, just feel the feelings and move through it. So yeah, it's really amazing. And you shared a little bit like about sort of being, you've created a community and a big following. And I just wondered what you feel from the therapy, from the community, from the family. What would you say has helped you the most in this past year? Probably the most difficult year of your life. If there's one thing that you could say that really helped the most.
Well, I think fortunately I came into this experience with years of sort of self-practice behind me. So I'd done yoga for a long time, and I'd practiced mindfulness and meditated. So I think that you can't be fully prepared for it, but having that previous knowledge helped me to break through the first couple of weeks and months, although it was very hard to meditate. And actually, I probably wouldn't even recommend properly sitting and meditating in the first weeks and months, because you almost need the autopilot. In fact, you definitely need the autopilot, because it's such a traumatic and tragic time. But then when that autopilot switch went off and I was able to start practicing again, that was initially the first thing that helped me to feel. And I don't really like the term healing so much when you talk about grief, because I said that I think grief is it stays with you. It's a lifelong thing. But I do think you need to feel to heal. So really allowing myself to feel that was the first step. And then when I reached out to the community that I had, it was all people who followed me because of pregnancy wellness that I did. So you can imagine those two things are, I became the person that was my followers' worst nightmare, basically, a mother without a child. So when I first put out there that I lost Elvis, that he died, and he died in labor, I think I fully expected to. Well, I think I had a lot of shame around it. I think it was a very shameful feeling that I held. So I thought that a lot of people would judge me. So when I just got this heartfelt response from people, I mean, of course I lost followers. I mean, there's no, it's going to happen, because you're just not their cup of tea anymore, if you want to call it that. But for the most part, people were just so wonderful. And that I was having, little droplets of kindness from everywhere in the world. I was having people that have never met me before send me little really thoughtful little gifts. And I was this, especially during coronavirus, this time of pure connection, at a time that we couldn't even really see people. So what certainly got me through is being able to share my story and have people resonate with it, and have people from all walks of life feel something. And it felt like I was in some way making some kind of a difference, and that really helped. So those would be my two biggest things that have really carried me through, is having my past knowledge, and then being able to use that toolkit to get me through. But equally, I guess I wouldn't even say calling it getting through, because I've tried to just, by being mindful, not trying to rush ahead or be anywhere other than where I am at this moment in time. Although, you know, don't get me wrong, there's been times when I've been like, I just want to be 5 years down the line. I just want to be 5 years away from this place. Because I talk, you know, openly about it, and I'm in a space where I'm sharing, and I'm in a good place right now to share. That doesn't mean that I'm like this all the time. You know, there's still really, really difficult days that I wish I wasn't in that reality, of course. But having those tools has really supported me, and it's just been an amazing foundation to work with. And then the people around me that have helped me up have just been those sort of building blocks as well. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, having a spiritual practice and staying with it, like you say, is such a powerful foundation. And I know, again, that it is still really early days, so your process is going to continue to evolve and develop, your grief process. But what would you say has been the hardest part of your grief of Elvis? What's been the hardest part to reconcile?
I mean, I touched on it a little bit before, but it was certainly the fact that he died in labor when I'd spent years. It wasn't just about teaching people, it was that was my and still is, you know, my passion, was empowering women to have positive pregnancies and births. And, you know, I worked a lot with people who had previous birth trauma, and, you know, I'd helped so many people have such a beautiful experience the second time round. And even to the point where after Elvis died, I had an email a week later from somebody who had exactly the same story, you could call it, as mine. Our previous births were pretty much the same. And she sent me a picture of her baby at home. They had, you know, a beautiful home birth. And I think it was probably that feeling, which I'm still working with, of failure, that I wasn't able to safely guide him into this world. And as a parent, you'll always feel guilt in losing a child, and every parent will, because it doesn't matter how that child has died, you'll always some way come back to saying, I'm the parent, I should have protected them. So there'll always be a level of guilt. So for me, it's been working through the guilt that I wasn't able to help him arrive in this world safely, and that it happened in a process of something that I felt I was so in tune with, and that I could conquer any of it. And yeah, that's been the most difficult part for me. But, you know, I know where to get the support, and it's something that I'm working on. And I feel like, again, when I said before, you know, you need to feel to heal, I think you need to acknowledge that these things are there, and acknowledge that guilt exists, and how do you work forward with it, and become more comfortable with the fact that it's there, because it doesn't matter how many times people tell you it's not your fault, it will always somehow feel a little bit like it was. So
yeah, and to that point that you just said, you know, things that people say, this question is not in any way, shape or form to like shame people, because I think that you know, my question really was around the unhelpful things that people have said to you, and it's more really for whoever's watching to just, so we can all be more mindful of things, you know, because we don't know sometimes the things that we say that can be really unhelpful. So were there any that you particularly remember that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think anybody watching this will already be somebody that's quite tuned into the you know, the I guess unfair things that some people might say. So I wouldn't go for for the unthought about or the really hurtful things. But what I would say, because there's plenty of them that come out or that people do, they just ignore the fact that you've lost a child. I think that's probably one of the difficult ones. But I think anybody watching this will be in tune with how to approach those situations and probably won't have a problem discussing grief. But what I would say, if you're helping somebody through it, is, and I did a post about this recently actually, is that when you're offering to help, don't say, let me know if you need anything. Because I think that for the person saying it, it makes you feel better, like you've done something, you've said the words. But what it does is it puts the onus on the person who's grieving to say what they need and almost in a way feel as if they're a burden, and that's the last thing that you need to feel at that time. So doing practical things, practical support, because for me, certainly, when I spoke about the shame that I had, if anybody asked me, let me know what you need, I didn't feel like I was deserving of anything. So to ask for something, I was feeling like that was, I was undeserving of it, so I shouldn't be asking. And that's how I felt in the early days. Now, it's quite funny that possibly the most triggering thing comes from younger children, which is difficult because they can't actually help this. But this is from my own personal journey, and I know that a lot of other women that I connect with and other dads as well feel this. If you see your living children, if you have living children playing with other children, and there's the conversation of siblings, it's really difficult to see, because you're having to watch your child, who, especially with us, he's very young, Gus is 3, see a child with their sibling telling them that that's their baby brother or baby sister, particularly when they're similar ages to Gus and Elvis would be. And Gus says, oh, I've got a brother too. And often there's a question, well, where is your brother? And then I have to see him think about it and then say that my brother died. And he's 3 years old. And that's so painful to have to watch a child that age not just deal with the fact that he's lost, his brother, not just deal with the trauma of the whole situation, but also have to think about his communication to other people when he's talking about it. And actually watching his little brain ticking about how he should say it and how he should deliver that information is really difficult to watch. So actually, my advice is to adults is to, when you're communicating, definitely in the early days, really practical help is better than filling space with words, is my advice. But then when it comes to younger children, there really is nothing that you can do about that, other than become yourself more capable of being able to deal with it, and learning how to explain death to a child as well, because Gus's awareness is, he's an incredible little guy, and he's so tuned in and tuned on and aware of the world, and the way that we've communicated death with him, I have no doubt has helped him to overcome those difficulties that he's faced. So as a parent, the hardest thing is seeing your child having to explain it and work through that grief.
That's really interesting. Would you be open to sharing a little bit more about how you talked to Gus about death and Elvis?
Yeah, of course. So, I think it's really important that everybody's got different beliefs, but that the child's beliefs is in line with the parents' belief system, or the adults around the child if they've lost a parent, so that their awareness is in line with the adults around them who are helping them and who are supporting them. I think that it's really important to use techniques like therapeutic play to allow children to express themselves, because, you know, kids don't come to you and say, "Mummy, I'm sad." Often, if they're that age, they'll act out. Perhaps, you know, it could be aggression, or it could be emotion. It could be many different things. Attention seeking. They could have regression, like bedwetting, or doing things like baby talk, which isn't normal for them. So noticing those little simple things is a way for you to be more in tune with how they grieve and how they show you that they're grieving. And when you notice those little things, trying to help them to communicate. So things that I like to do is use like sticker books, or, you know, we'll talk about Elvis and we'll ask about, you know, his understanding of it. We'll prompt questions. And some people might think that's a bit morbid, but it's really important that he grasps and understands, and also knows that he can talk about Elvis when he wants to. You never want the child to feel like they've got this barrier up when it comes to talking about that loved one. And I think what's also really important is helping them to understand the permanency of it as well, even though I really believe in impermanence, but it's helping them to understand that that person will never be here again as a person living out the way that we do as humans, but there are other ways that we can connect with them. So however you as a parent choose to continue your bond, that's the best way to explain that to a child. And there was one last thing I can't remember that we've done with him.
I just had a quick question in relation to that, because we always use the word loss, and some people, you know, can see that as a little bit confusing to children, for example. Did you come across anything about that?
So to be honest, at home, we don't really use the word loss. And I've spoken quite openly about this on my Instagram as well. And I find a lot of bereaved parents feel the same about the word loss, is that, you know, you haven't lost your child died. So it's difficult, because when you're in this community, you know, the name of this community is Baby Loss Community. You know, all of the charities out there, they support in baby loss. When there's statistics or there's information, it's always normally headed with baby loss. So it's difficult to move away from that. So I think it's really just important to, in your home space, again, that idea of whatever is right for the parents, use that and communicate it through to your child as well. But words are really important. Like, for example, explaining to a child that we've had with Gus, we've had people say to him when we're not there that Elvis is sleeping. So we've had to then explain to him that he's not sleeping, he's dead. And because for a child, it's scary, you know, that might make them scared about going to sleep at night, because they're worried that they'll never wake up again. And yeah, so I think that a lot of the time people they think that it's better because they're going to scare the child by using a word like death. But bear in mind that children often don't have these pre-learned experiences that we've got from years and years of growing up. And their interpretation of words is a lot purer than what ours is. There's not the baggage that comes with it the same way that we have as adults. So being really direct and using, you know, the correct terminology when you're talking to them, rather than trying to make it sound softer, because it's not going to make it easier for them if you make it softer. It will make it harder as they grow up and they learn more about it. So yeah.
Is there any books that you've read that have been particularly helpful on subjects? Yeah.
Yes, there's for children to read, there's The Invisible String, is a really good one. There is Little Precious People. I think that's the right name for it. Little Precious People, yeah, or Precious Little People. I think that's the one. And The Invisible String is more about the bond that will never break. Although you can't see that string, they will always have that bond. I explain it to Gus as well. I use magnets. That's a really nice way to explain it to him as well, that although he can't see Elvis, that pull is always going to be there. And the Precious Little People is explains him a little bit more about sort of pregnancy loss. So if the parents have lost in early pregnancy perhaps, and it wasn't as obvious that there was a baby there. But that's a really good way to describe to children. And there's another one, I can't remember, I think it's White Rabbit it's called, and it's about a little rabbit who his little rabbit brother died, and it's his parents explaining to him because he thought it was his fault. And yeah, there's so many lovely books out there and so many lovely authors. I don't know if you do a resources page after this, but I could always send some over, because that would be really, yeah.
I think that would be awesome. And I was also thinking as well, if there are any books you read for adults as well that really help.
Yeah. So I mean, I've sort of I guess I've avoided the normal types of grief books. I don't know why. Perhaps it's because I like to look at everything a little bit differently than other people, maybe. So for me, there's a book called what is it? Oh, I can't remember. Well, firstly, there's one called Continuing Bonds, which is about continuing bonds with your children. So that is a normal sort of, it's a bereaved parent book, which is really wonderful. The Art of Living is the one I was trying to think about. And it's from, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, or Thich, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, can you say it?
I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's Thich Nhat Hanh is how you pronounce it, something like that. So anyway, basically all of his books.
Yeah.
And also Pema Chodron, who's one of his, so anything from her as well. But yeah, The Art of Living has been, because it's not really about, well, it's about everything. It's about the art of living. So it talks a lot about birth and death, and the concept of birth and death, more than them actually being a thing. But it talks about the impermanence of them and how we are ever changing. And before we existed, as in before we were a fetus, we existed within our parents when they were children. And that crazy theory of your mum had all her eggs when she was inside her mum as a baby, as a fetus. It's incredible. So that we exist in the people that are our family before we ever exist, and how when you die, your continuation remains. So your family, and every day that they live is a continuation of you, and every time somebody says your name, writes your name in the sand, or and thinks about you, that's your continuation. So
I love that. Thank you so much for those recommendations.
That's okay.
And lastly, because I know we're coming to the end of time, but what messages could you impart to any families or women, men going through something that you've been through in the past year?
I think firstly it would be to reach out and find your people, because at the time you feel like you're the only person in the world going through that. But unfortunately, but also in a way, fortunately for you, there are a lot of people out there who have lived it and who are living it. And there's no better support than the people who are going through those motions. Because when you talk to people who are, you start a sentence halfway through, you already know. You don't need to, when you ask, every time I speak to one of my friends that I've made, who's also a bereaved parent, call up and you're like, how you doing? They go, yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I know. So you don't need to fill in the blanks. So finding your people, definitely. Depending on what your sort of well-being things were before, whatever you use to do self-care, leaning back into that when the time is right. You carry your child with you, and I think that although you've got so much love that you can't give to them, and that can feel like this pent up energy, and it's really hard to process that, but put that love into your family, put that love into the people around you, and put that love into yourself. Because I always say that kindness to yourself is kindness to your child. That's really one of the best ways to channel that love, and you're just giving it a place and somewhere to flourish. So yeah, although you might not feel like you should be looked after or that you're worthy of it, you absolutely are. So allow yourself that love. I think that's my words of advice.
The perfect place to wrap up. And as I said earlier, I feel so much wisdom from you, but I also feel so much compassion and so much love. And I just encourage everyone to look at your Instagram page, which is at Mindful Grief Coach, because you do incredible posts that are helping so many people. And I'm just very grateful to be reconnected with you. Sorry that it's, through the circumstances that they are, but, this is part of the rich tapestry of life, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you very much again, Tahnee.
Thank you so much.